Action. I feel like this looks familiar.
I don't know what you mean. Hi, guys.
Welcome back to the Layman's Guide to Whiskey with Max and Adam. As always, he is Max.
Still Max.
And
Still Adam.
I'm still Adam, at least today. Today we're going to be talking about Wyoming Whiskey.
Woo!
Wyoming Whiskey. Not from Kentucky, surprisingly. But it is
Made
a bourbon.
in Indiana.
Not this time. If you remember our first episode on Bourbon 101, we did mention the fact that bourbon does not need to be made in Kentucky. It actually can be made anywhere in the continental United States, though 95% of it does come from Kentucky.
Right.
This is one of those brand new, newer, craft distilleries that have been popping up all over the United States in the grand state of Wyoming.
Right. So we know some about it. We know that it is now aged 5 years. The master distiller is Steve Nally, who came from
Maker's Mark. Spent many years distilling with Maker's Mark, so he brought a lot of that expertise over with him, helping build this distillery from the ground up. So again, if you remember our conversation about Stolen in episode 3, I don't remember anything we talked about. We talked a lot about LDI and MGP and people sourcing whiskey from other distilleries. This is a place that's doing it the way that we want it to be done in the craft world, where they built it from the ground up and they're taking their time and their patience. 5.5 years, full-sized American bourbon barrels.
And interestingly, they're doing wheat. So and there's nothing on the label that I've noticed that says anything about them doing wheat. And I actually read in an interview that they said that they would rather have small batch on there. And it is a really small batch. They do 15 barrels as their batch, which honestly, for a small distillery, that's not that unusual because you don't have that many barrels. But it is a lot less than a lot of other brands will do. Kentucky.
If I remember correctly, the mash bill is 68%.
68,
8% corn.
2012. Does that math work out?
68, 2012.
Check it later.
Yeah. We're bartenders, not mathematicians. Yeah, that's honestly one of the best things about this is the fact that they are pretty transparent about this. We know all of that. We can talk about all of that. And nerds like us love that.
And I love that a lot of new brands will. And you kind of get to a point where if a newer brand doesn't want to talk about it, you kind of start wondering what they're not telling you. I'm excited about this one. This one I actually haven't tried yet, which is unusual.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, wow.
Well, straight up on the nose, there is that massive oak barrel. There's the vanilla. There's the caramel. It is a little softer than a lot of your traditional Kentucky whiskeys. It seems like it.
But you still get enough of that, that alcohol is coming through.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing that I didn't mention is I do know that it is an unusual proof. It's 88 proof, which is 44% alcohol as an homage to Wyoming being the 44th state. So witty. I like it. I'll go with you on that. No.
That is wheated bourbon.
Right.
It is softer. It is rounder. It hits the sides of the tongue a little more. There's a little cherry there. And actually,
it's a little spicier than I would have naturally thought because I still get, some little spice and around those edges of like a pepperiness to it.
Yeah, and I'm just angry at myself for just realizing why they're making a wheated bourbon. Their master distiller came from Maker's Mark. Maker's Mark is the most widely consumed wheated bourbon in the world. If you believe whiskey legend, they actually got their recipe from Pappy Van Winkle, and supposedly he slipped them some of their homegrown yeast too. So, depending on who you ask, drinking Maker's Mark is supposedly the closest to drinking what the whiskey Pappy Van Winkle himself would have been distilling that you can get to nowadays. If any of that's true, I would love for someone to confirm for me because I don't think it's true. I always include the caveat. I say I've heard this story. I have no evidence.
I've also heard Weller. It all came from Weller.
Well, Weller was the original Pappy brand. Full Fitz and Weller. But there was no Pappy Van Winkle. Anyway,
right.
Anyway, back to this whiskey. What's nice about this is the finish is super clean. It doesn't linger, it doesn't hang on tongue. I think
I get that peppery that does hang on though.
Oh, I think,
and I get just a little bit of like a mentholated sort of thing.
There's definitely a little bit of menthol on the back there. I get a little bit of white pepper, maybe not so much of the black pepper. I think that
I'll give you white. Yeah,
I'm very white. I think what's interesting about this,
he's cool. He's got a pass. I swear.
I think what's interesting about this that kind of makes it different while being familiar is the climate that's being aged in. So much of what makes Kentucky whiskey taste like Kentucky whiskey is the fact that it's being aged in Kentucky. That barrel interaction, that heat, those summers, those seasons are all happening in a very specific climate. Having this take place in Wyoming and having it be a full 5.5 years.
But I think that's why you kind of have to go longer. You're going to get less interaction with the wood because of your seasons.
Well, I don't necessarily know that's a longer aging. Most Kentucky distillers will tell you that the average age for their whiskey is between 6 to 8 years old. A lot of distillers will tell you it's overaged too much.
Totally
I think that
agree,
this is
but
just
a lot of
more
our craft
delicate
stuff.
A lot of the craft stuff is a lot younger.
2 years. What I know brands go 1 year. So I think 5 is a great age for it. And I know that when they first came out, they were a little bit younger, and they've decided to go a little older.
Well, that's one of the things about the craft distilling. It's growing as we grow as drinkers. We're seeing things now that we wouldn't have seen 5 years ago. And 5 years from now, I'm really interested to see what happens then, both with this and the other guys. So
that's drinkable.
It absolutely is. As always, if you'd like to raise a glass with us, hit that subscribe button underneath. And if you want to actually drink with us, Wex, where can they find you?
Chestnut Club, Santa Monica, Whiskey Tuesdays.
Sure.
Would have been Whiskey Wednesdays, but name was taken.
I don't know about that. And if you want to read more of my thoughts on whiskey over the years, you can go to ballandbondla.com. Or if you want to come see me in person, you can actually visit me at the Nomad Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. But until next time, cheers.
Not pouring anything out for the homies.